So, GM everyone, I am Eomji from Encode Club, education community. Perhaps some of you already met me or met our team members around the world, working on some different blockchain education program. Today, I have an honor to talk to this amazing panelist about a DePIN, how they're positioning themselves in the world of the DePIN, which recently has got a lot of traction, and what DePIN actually means, and what kind of things DePIN unlock the different types of potential with all these projects in the space. So we're gonna start with actually the host of this event as well, Fluence team, what is DePIN and what Fluence is doing with it, and can you introduce yourself and the Fluence?
Yeah. Hey everyone, is it working? Yeah. I'm Evgeny, co-founder of Fluence, and we're doing decentralized computing platform with Fluence. On DePIN, I think DePIN is just a new fancy word for sharing economy or crowdsourcing. It's kind of the same thing but with blockchain, so that's why it's sound better. But it's the same idea. You basically crowdsourcing resources from independent agents or people or companies, sort of aggregating them and then providing some value somewhere. And it could be one way or another. In our case, we are aggregating computing power from professional providers, packaging them as a sort of a cloud service, and then provide it to customers. And it's sort of a more B2B story. There might be B2C stories. There might be stories when consumers, end users, buy special device to collect some data, and then this data is aggregated, packaged, and sold to some enterprises, and all kind of models, but they all kind of very similar. It's more like Uber for X, but based on blockchain, something like that. That's the DePIN overall, I think.
Very exciting. So there, how about also our panelists, going on one after another? Can you introduce yourself and your project, especially how DePIN is changing or influencing your project?
Yeah, I'm Anna from Vana. So we focus on private user-owned data in order to kind of aggregate large data sets and train better AI models. So think your Reddit data, your Twitter data, your email data. Most AI models today are just trained on the public internet. So that's what you find when you go on Google and don't log into any sites. But most valuable information to train AI models sits behind those closed walls. I think one of the really important pieces of DePIN is kind of how you do verification, right? How do you decide that someone should be rewarded for what they've provided to the network? And in our context, we kind of run proof of contribution, which is measuring how valuable a given person's data is to actually teaching an AI model something. And I come from kind of a crypto and an AI background, got into mining Ethereum back in 2015, just with free electricity in my dorm room. And then was at Seoul, which is MIT's AI lab, doing research on kind of natural language processing at the time, which has now evolved into the field of large language models.
Very exciting. I actually like listening that DePIN is might be different from different angles. So we are Staex. We're based in Berlin, Germany. I'm Alexandra, one of the co-founders, and we have a unique history because we're mostly coming from the telco space. So we have been developed by the telco, and I guess that the angle that we like looking at from the DePIN space is for us DePIN is the IoT. So we are coming from the IoT space. And IoT has been extremely difficult because in IoT, you actually have IoT builders, up to 18 stakeholders to build one application. So what not so many people know about is the complexity behind IoT systems it's growing exponentially. And as part of DT, I've seen a ton of projects that they started. It would go for years, really 5-7 years. They would spend lots of millions. They would stop it because they even couldn't launch into the market. The other angle of the problems in IoT is the margins. So there are no margins. And all of this complexity actually leads to the fact that not so many IoT applications are out there. So that's why we're excited about DePIN. And Staex is the network that we help companies to build these multi-sided business models. Because you need a very complex network where everybody has access to every bits, from every machine, etc. So this is what we are building. Very exciting. We built the first drone corridor based on our network in Germany in May. And we continue building this, very complicated things where multiple stakeholders are involved. So happy to be here and discuss the things.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Patrick from Gelato. At Gelato, we focus on basically building a verifiable, scalable, and interoperable cloud for rollups and chains as a whole. We currently support OP Stack and Arbitrum to basically launch these chains. We're also working together with Fluence on that front. And one thing we're very interested in DePIN is specifically because we're actually one of the prime users for DePIN, because right now we're using traditional cloud setups. However, in the future, we would like to use different DePIN solutions to further decentralize also our operation. So just as it was initially mentioned, we see ourselves basically as one of the prime users for DePIN.
It's so interesting. By just listening what all of you are doing, I feel like we can sit here and talk about things again and more, 3 hours. Especially personally, I'm coming from mechanical engineering, control theory background, a little bit joint of hardware and kind of network. So all of things, I am really geeky now. I want to learn all the things in depth. But we should start from some baby step, DePIN, as you said, maybe it's nothing new, but finally we had the right time maybe to start with. But people are going to be asking questions blockchain is supposedly decentralized already at the first place, given that many protocols saying we solve the blockchain dilemma, right? Why DePIN, and what do you think about the stigma of saying a blockchain is completely decentralized, and what DePIN is providing value there? What is the essence of it?
I think one of the big values of DePIN is just reducing costs. It's very simple. Market likes when costs are reduced. That helps to products to be more widespread. And basically, blockchain also, one of the main value proposition is that it doesn't take any fees. So it's a neutral infrastructure network that allows people to transact and interact financially. Here we bring similar sort of vision to infrastructure networks, some physical devices network, or a hardware, computing, storage, all this stuff, machine learning, and we create protocols that do not take margin. They do not take fee versus centralized companies, right? That automatically makes things cheaper when you compare DePIN network to its centralized analogy. So that's the simplest and easiest thing that is could be understood by any consumer, that these things built with this magic blockchain technology, they're just cheaper. So, and if they give you the same quality or better quality of service, they maybe give you additionally, less censorship included in it. Or more verifiability, that that what you supposed to get, you get it from this network. That just really makes it more valuable from consumer perspective, and that's how it's better, I think, overall.
So can I add a very tricky question? So as you mentioned, comparison to the existing Web2 traditional rails of service, which taking a lot of fee, crypto is offering very cheap service. How you can make the business model revenue out of it? So for Fluence, obviously we are not charity. So what is motivation, and also how this DePIN infrastructure can running business sustainably?
Yeah, well, currently Fluence DAO is charity.
We got to start from somewhere.
Yeah, because we are not taking any fees at all from protocol revenue. I think eventually there's gonna be some small fee included that funds the DAO, and the DAO manages the protocol. But there's also like, because DePIN networks usually powered by token, there is token economics, and then basically, if you design your token economics right, if you listened to Tom's talk just before this, so you know now how to design the tokenomics of your DePIN network, then the token appreciates in value with growing usage of the network. Then this value appreciates in the token can be somehow extracted by the DAO. Basically, like some of this token can be exchanged to the cash and then fund the future development. So this is how this can work. So if you find the balance between the fee that is reasonable, which still keeps the price lower than centralized analogy, and the value extraction from the token appreciation, then it sort of would be sustainable.
Very exciting. And then for AI, like another like an interesting point, AI has been gaining like traction a lot recently. And there's like many people say that like a crypto cares AI a lot, but AI don't care crypto. But I think this is a great use case that why AI would care blockchain rails to build something on top of it, not only distributed center, but also having very fiability. So can you share a little bit more about what is the essence of building successful AI project, utilizing DePIN, what kind of points also maybe future founders would consider, or like a user who want to use the data from Vana?
Yeah, so generally AI models are really expensive to train, right? So if you look at some of the frontier models like Llama 3 or GPT-4, it could cost $10 million, $100 million in just compute. And then you also have kind of data and research on top of that. And so typically in like a Web 2 context, you have to do that with a centralized entity because there's just a huge amount of capital expenditure that needs to go towards making the AI models really capable. They're really large infrastructure problems. And I think that is where DePIN is kind of really well suited towards funding these big infrastructure problems, right? And amassing a lot of compute, amassing a lot of data in order to create these frontier, very capable AI models. I think one interesting data point I've seen is if you look at all of the compute that Ethereum miners have, it's about 50 times as much compute than what was used to train GPT-4, right? And so when you have these sorts of incentive systems, you really can amass a lot of resources to train frontier models, kind of the best AI models, and collect enough data in Vana's case, as long as you have that incentive system. The other thing I would add is that I think in DePIN, it's important to kind of either be working on the supply side or the demand side. And generally, DePIN networks are more successful if it is constrained on the supply side, right? Because DePIN kind of allows you to bootstrap that. And so Vana's focus is really on these data sets that live in big tech monopolies, right? The only person who can sell Reddit data today is Reddit, because they're the only ones with all of the private data. And so you really have this natural monopoly that you can unlock, and that's quite supply constrained.
Lovely. Again, I really want to ask so many different questions following up, or okay, I'm trying to holding myself. Alexandra, a question to this IoT aspects coming along with even handling hardware, different agents in network. As you said, it's really complicated system, and then making them on blockchain is on one way may make sense, but on the other way you are introducing another complexity there. So I'm curious, what is the essence of making this IoT on blockchain successful, and how DePIN plays, especially if you want to share some pros and challenges around there as well?
Sure. I guess I would just jump into examples because we've been working for the last 8 years with the industry. And I would say in the last 3 years, we finally got to the use cases, which is very beautiful. Because we are working with our customers, and each time we hear that there is something where we can, put data on chain, and we are very careful with this because in the, very beginning, early days, 2017, everybody was running around and putting everything on a blockchain. So we learned that, we have to be very careful with this. So first and foremost, what we learned, we sell into the industry, cheap didn't help us. So when we sell to the industrial clients, they say, cheap is not always better. So we spent like a ton of time to really translate our Web3 protocol into their value, which was very hard exercise. So after we've done this, we actually started to look into the actual use cases. So one of the use cases that we really love, it's mostly about regulations. So for instance, one of our customer, when they have cars and, we help them take data from these cars. And basically, they now have to report CO2 emissions. And what we're building for them is that the car can actually put this data on chain, and the regulator can actually just look into this, a report, and it's all automated, created by the network. Literally took us 1 week to integrate it. And the industry was really surprised because they said, well, if I would build such a service in Web 2, it would take us 5 years to certify, to make sure all the processes of data storage are secure, etc. It was just a buy-side product of what we were building. The other interesting use case is one of our customers, they own telco towers, and they have to measure electromagnetic field strength around these towers. So when they do this with drones, they also can automatically sign the data on the machine itself and then just push it on chain. So the kind of process of trusted entities is very short here. So you don't have to push the data back to the cloud. Then they have to make sure that no employees can hack into this data and change it. Very complicated processes that the companies have to build. It has to be audited every year. The costs are insane. And here it's a very simple structure. The device measures, signs, puts on chain. That's it. Then the auditor gets in and looks into this. It takes us some time to get to these use cases, but we think it's a very powerful thing. And when the industry sees that this can be built within days, just to see this spark in their eyes is very, very cool.
It's beautiful to hear that, asking about the complexity, but the answer is simple, which is very commonly we think that introducing a new Web2 infrastructure or apps getting onboarded to Web3 is often more complex, but there's a use case is that it makes it simpler for them. It's beautiful thing happen, as you said, it's very powerful. And now going towards the in line of the complexity, Gelato, as an expert of running those services, why moving from Google Cloud to DePIN infrastructure? Given that, again, it can introduce different types of challenges. What is the challenges moving to DePIN infrastructure? Yet, why are you moving and why this is important?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think if we take a look at it today, a lot of requirements that we have from our customers is that adding support and adding decentralization is always connected to introducing additional latency into the system. And looking into the current landscape, the truth is 40 to 50% of Web3 is still DeFi. And DeFi clients are very, very latency sensitive because every millisecond is a theoretical arbitrage opportunity on perpetuals, for example. And DePIN is a very nice value proposition for them because they want to be decentralized, because being centralized is a risk for them because depending on the jurisdiction, they might get letters from the SEC that they obviously don't want to have. And that's why, generally speaking, we are, and also our clients are very excited about DePIN. But what is crucial now is the phase of sort of migrating from this more centralized setup to a decentralized setup has to be done right, because we need to make sure that the use cases that we create today have a big improvement as soon as we move to a decentralized setup. What I mean by that is basically same latency, similar cost. It could even be more expensive at the start, to be honest. I think that's in line with also bigger...
Start at the charity?
Exactly. But we could then further scale down cost as the network gets bigger, right? But I think that's key to actually migrating.
So, each of you were introducing your perspective and your project, how approaching DePIN, how utilizing it, and so on. among all these, like I'm curious, like in this technology, what part you are building in-house and what part like you are outsourcing or like working with partners, given that each solution seems like huge solution, huge problem to tackle. So I'm wondering which is the part you would like take it in-house, which is like outsourcing, and why is this so? Like, what is the decision making, especially like as a founder and like a driving growth? Like, you are in like a decision making process of like what to make it close, what to make it like trusting our partners. Can you share some about that?
Yeah, I think nothing unusual here. We do almost everything in-house, and we are just partnering with other companies on sort of when we need some integration. Like, let's say we partnered with Parasail on the liquid token. Like, we are partnering with Gelato to basically run the chain. We're not developing the chain as well ourselves. We are only building smart contracts and the off-chain infrastructure. But core business is in-house, should be in-house. That's it.
Founder mode.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about Web3 is that everything is so composable. And so one of the responsibilities I see of a protocol is really defining the very small piece of the stack that you focus on and kind of creating incentives for other people to build around that stack. So with Vana, we really focus on permissions and incentives around private data. So how do you allow people to create these different data DAOs on the platform? But we defer a lot to the builders to have kind of full control over their data tokenomics, for example, right? The LinkedIn data DAO guy, he has like a tokenomics advisor who just thinks about the value of LinkedIn data, right? And so kind of enabling builders to focus on a specific piece of the stack. And I think to do that, you do need the network to be truly permissionless and kind of give folks a lot of control and autonomy in what they're building out. I think you see this in other places in DePIN networks. Like there are some solar projects where there's been a ton of innovation where people are actually starting businesses on top of Glow protocol, the solar project, spinning up a bunch of solar panels and innovating to get more rewards, right? And so the responsibility of the protocol is kind of you design the game of the incentives and kind of the rules of how it works. And then people can play that game and play it, kind of game it. And ideally, if you design the incentives right, when they game it and win, you also win and kind of achieves the goals of the protocol.
Right. So I guess for us, it's a little bit different. We are still pre-token launch. So we, as I said, just to get the best result, we went the normal industrial route. And we actually been building everything by ourselves. So I don't know, we had the vision. We didn't want to give out the apps or the dApps as a lot of protocol are doing. So they are giving it out to the community. So I think it's like the first 10 customers, you have to bear hug them, like from the Web2 startup. We are doing the same because also from these dApps, we are pushing a lot of stuff into our protocol from the feature set. And so right now we are doing this by ourselves. So maybe this is something in the future that we can already start letting go because basically the more people can build on the network, the better it gets. And I guess as everyone here, the protocol belongs to us. We also put a lot of philosophy into the protocol itself. We define these rules like transparent like water, because it should be transparent for developers. Simple like a monk. We think a lot about security. So I'm a true believer, the very complex system can never be secure because then even developers don't know what's what and where is, the data sets. So we are kind of also coming from network. So this is our DNA. So this kind of outsourcing of the apps, this would be the next step for us.
Yeah, I would generally agree with everything that was said. I think like the core products should be in-house, but I think there's a lot of merit to outsourcing certain parts, like your cloud usage, for example, because there's just some economy of scale that always happens. And I think there's a lot of like areas within DePIN where that already, hopefully starts to happen very soon. And we generally see like also the demand for it already, because we initially actually built some decentralization for our infrastructure like a couple of years back, when everybody was doing it, before DePIN was called DePIN. But we also saw that like this is just distracting from like our main business, and it makes way more sense to just use like a third-party service that helps us like decentralizing, where we can like opt in.
Yeah, of course. Like, and then eventually you will have also like your users who will be using your service while building their own things, because this just makes sense, right? Then my next question would be, actually, it's like something very personally I was curious about as DePIN getting very, very popular. What is the typical myth of DePIN people misunderstanding? Like people say this and you feel like, oh, that's not true. Or a bit like an extended version of DePIN, like DePIN and kind of extended of your project area. People say something and then you're like, okay, that's a little bit misunderstanding. And this is a great opportunity to tell us like some nitty-gritty details of that. Anybody who would love to, like, has something come up to your mind?
Yeah, we're often like faced, because we're talking to like DeFi projects, gaming projects, also traditional Web2 enterprises. And oftentimes like DePIN is seen as like an equivalent to AI, like one-to-one. There's like no differences. They just say DePIN and AI and they really just talk about AI.
Oh my God.
And we see this like actually fairly often, especially like with Web2 enterprises and DeFi, like they don't really know about DePIN and what you can do, and it still needs like a lot of explanation so they understand like the differences.
Yeah, we hear a lot because you've been covering it also about supply and demand, because DePIN as the community, right? And not so many people like, or there are some people that don't believe in demand. Like, okay, that's great that we gather all this data, but you know, who's gonna buy it? And so, or like there won't be a buyer behind it. So I think kind of this bit, because there are a lot of amazing DePIN companies that have, you know, very, like huge amount of users, etc. So I think we just, you know, can be more creative, and maybe in the normal industry, it's data sets that are not requested. But for a lot of Web3 services, these are very cool data sets that we can all gather. So I guess this has kind of also been interesting to yeah.
How about Anna? Three?
Yeah, I think one, like I agree with what guys were saying. Yeah, it's actually a pretty common things that we hear, but also actually not everyone knows what DePIN means. Like,
What DePIN is?
yeah, so just guys, so you know, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. So like, remember this. And if you think of this like physical infrastructure network, oh, okay, it actually makes sense that it's not only AI, or it actually makes sense that there are some value. Like I used Uber at some point, and it was also some physical, you know, automobiles infrastructure network. So yeah, sort of makes sense.
Yes. I think like especially like a DePIN, I think some people forget that there's a P in it. So they were shilling like decentralized infrastructure, but that's like cloud or like some in more like
people think that decentralized infrastructure is DeFi.
And then like having a infra token and then like a hardware chips. That's funny. That's very, very funny. I can so relate that. How about Anna?
Yeah, I think that broadly just making sure that there is a closed loop, which is what you talked about, right? You can bootstrap supply with a token, but at some point, like rubber meets the road and you need some kind of demand flowing in. I think one mistake that, is easy to make is just like, oh, we can just incentivize all of this. But I think the real challenge for folks building in the DePIN space is like, what is that core behavior or contribution or physical infrastructure that you need somebody to provide, and how do you really incentivize that?
So given the like time constraints, like I would have like one more question that especially all this project, and I'm coming from like, you know, developer education side. I'm really curious, developers, engineers, or like a general builders who are interested in your project. If they want to play with your project, doing something on top of it, what would you say there's some like opportunity right there, maybe interesting problem to solve, and you are looking for talents like doing that? Would you share some cases or like something you're looking for?
Yeah, I would just give one quick example. Like as we build in the cloud, like in the cloud, you basically, there is a different ways to consume the compute power, different pricing models. And there could be like reserved pricing, there could be on-demand markets, there could be like a spot markets, right? When you rent the capacity and it can be taken from you as soon as someone else rents it at on-demand or reserved pricing. So for example, right now only building reserved pricing, and we want to basically, bring more types of pricing to Fluence platform, and it can be potentially just built by independent developers on top of our core marketplace. So this is something interesting. And that's a smart contracts. That's kind of like if you're a blockchain developer, if you know Solidity, that's something to experiment with.
If someone is our computing power marketplace, please talk to me as well. How about Anna?
Yeah, so Vana is really designed for data DAOs, where you can kind of pool data around a particular source, because if you just have your own data, it's not that valuable. But if you have 100,000 people's data, then you can train AI models on it. And so it's completely open source, and many of the data DAOs are completely open source as well. You could go look at the Twitter one and sort of modify it to be for a different data source like Discord, Spotify, whatever you want. And you don't need anyone's permission to start a data DAO. So a lot of people don't realize that you legally own all of your data. It's kind of like when you put your car in a parking lot, like the parking lot doesn't own your car. Same thing with every platform, right? So like Spotify doesn't own your Spotify data, Facebook doesn't own your Facebook data. So you can just choose a data source and then start a data DAO around that. Probably takes a few hours to get spun up initially, but if you really want to go through with it, it can be pretty involved. It could take a couple of weeks, but there are also really strong kind of network incentives built into Vana towards some of those data DAOs.
One more quick question. So you just made example of the Spotify data or YouTube data such as, is there some wild data DAO you want to see?
There are some that have surprised me already. So there's a protein engineering data DAO contributing like protein folding data sets. That's pretty interesting. There's some health data sets as well. If folks want to build audio data sets, so we also do kind of demand aggregation. We call it kind of like a data market maker, but we just aggregate people who want to buy data mostly for AI training. So there are a lot of folks who want to buy audio data of like rarer languages where there's not a lot on the internet. Also, a recent request was actually a translation data set between English and Japanese, because there's not a lot of data there. So those are some interesting specific examples.
Very interesting. How about Alexandra?
Yeah, right. So coming back to our philosophy that we are onboarding the industry on Web3, probably to the business folks between you, if you have people working for industries like, where they produce machines like robot makers, drone makers, charging stations, cars, just, educate them that it's super easy how to enroll into Web3 world would be really helpful for us. And send them our way. For developers, just go on our website, download our stack, play around with this, see how you can connect your devices, give us feedback, because we also want to get better all the time. This is, I guess, the most cases that can help us. And the third case, because I told you that we are generating IoT data into very new, interesting business models, like the drones that are selling the data into the tower stations. If you come up across so crazy data mixes, also please contact us. We're going to be happy to build it.
Yeah, from our side, we're very interested in projects that are building sort of new infrastructure in Web3. What I mean by that is today, a lot of rollups are pretty much centralized. And one thing that would be really interesting is having a decentralized option for a lot of the infrastructure that is needed today to build a rollup. There's 10,000 RPC providers out there, but there's not a lot of differentiation between them. And I think decentralizing crucial parts like oracles, indexers, RPCs, and other low-level things that basically everyone needs would be a pretty cool project. Even for single developers just to play around, that they can open source or contribute would be actually quite valuable.
So if you're a developer or engineer who are interested in building something or playing with blockchain, but don't know where to start from, we just got amazing ideas to start from. And obviously, if you're tackling that idea, here is the mentor you can directly contact. So please give a big applause to our panelists and continue building together.